Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because today we re-dive into something that affects millions of people every single day and more specifically, why it feels absolutely impossible to stop once it starts. You know that feeling, right? It's 2 a.m. You're lying in bed, and your brain is replaying that conversation from 3 days ago, analyzing every word you said, every facial expression the other person made, wondering if you came across wrong, if they're mad at you, if you should text them to clarify, and suddenly you re-spiraling into this endless loop of what-ifs and maybes that seems to have no off switch. So why does this happen? Why can't we just tell our brains to chill out and move on? Well, the answer is actually fascinating and involves neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and some quirks of how our minds are wired that made perfect sense thousands of years ago, but do UNT serve us quite as well in our modern world? Let's start with the brain itself, because understanding the mechanics of overthinking is the first step to understanding why it's so sticky. When you overthink, you're primarily engaging your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and analyzing potential outcomes. It's your brain's strategy department. Now, the prefrontal cortex is amazing at problem-solving. But here's the catch. It can always tell the difference between a real problem that needs solving and a hypothetical worry that you're just spinning around in your head. To your prefrontal cortex, both situations trigger the same response: keep thinking, keep analyzing, find the solution. The problem is, with overthinking there often isn't a solution to find because you're not dealing with a concrete problem. You're dealing with uncertainty, ambiguity, or past events that can't be changed. But your brain doesn't know that. So it keeps churning, keeps processing, trying to find an answer that doesn't exist. And this is where that impossible to stop feeling comes from. Your brain is stuck in problem-solving mode with no problem to actually solve. Now let's talk about the evolutionary angle, because this is where things get really interesting. Our ancestors lived in environments where overthinking certain things, like whether that rustling in the bushes was a predator or whether that person from another tribe could be trusted, was literally a survival mechanism. The individuals who spent more time analyzing potential threats, who played out different scenarios in their heads, who worried about what could go wrong, were often the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes. In other words, were literally descended from the warriors. The people whose brains wouldn't let them just relax because relaxing could mean death. Fast forward to today, and we're not running from predators anymore, but our brains still operate on that same ancient software. The problem is, modern life gives us way more ambiguous situations to worry about: social interactions, career decisions, relationship dynamics, financial concerns. None of these come with clear right or wrong answers. Yet our brains treat them with the same urgency as a life or death threat. Then there's the role of the amygdala, which is your brain's alarm system. When you perceive something as threatening, and this can be a physical threat or an emotional one, like embarrassment or rejection, your amygdala fires up and triggers your stress response. This floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, which are designed to help you fight or flee. But when the threat is just a worry in your head, there's nothing to fight or flee from. So all that stress, energy, has nowhere to go. It just keeps circulating, keeping you alert, keeping you anxious, and keeping your prefrontal cortex engaged in that endless analysis loop. This is why overthinking often comes with physical symptoms: racing heart, tight chest, difficulty sleeping because your body is in a state of alert even though there's no actual danger. Another huge factor is something called rumination, which is essentially the psychological term for and it's particularly sticky because of how our memory and attention systems work. When you ruminate, you're rehearsing the same thoughts over and over, and every time you do this, you're actually strengthening the neural pathways associated with those thoughts like carving a deeper groove in your brain. The more you think about something, the more easily that thought comes back to you, and the harder it becomes to think about anything else. This is why people who overthink about one thing often find themselves overthinking about everything. They've trained their brains to default to this pattern. It's not a character flaw or a lack of willpower. It's literally how neural plasticity works. Your brain becomes what you practice, and if you practice overthinking, you get better at overthinking. There's also the issue of uncertainty intolerance, which is a psychological trait that varies from person to person. Some people are naturally more comfortable with ambiguity and not knowing how things will turn out, while others find uncertainty deeply distressing. If you're someone with low tolerance for uncertainty, your brain interprets ambiguous situations as threats, which triggers that whole overthinking cycle as your brain desperately tries to eliminate the uncertainty by thinking through every possible scenario. The cruel irony is that overthinking actually makes you feel less certain, not more. Because the more you analyze, the more variables and possibilities you discover, which creates even more uncertainty, which triggers more overthinking. It's a vicious cycle. And here's something that makes it even harder to stop. Overthinking can actually feel productive. When you're analyzing a situation, playing out different scenarios, considering various perspectives, it can feel like you're doing important work, like you're being thorough and responsible. Your brain rewards this with little hits of dopamine because it thinks you're problem-solving, even though you're really just spinning your wheels. This makes overthinking somewhat addictive. It feels like you're accomplishing something, like you're getting closer to an answer or preparing yourself for every eventuality. But in reality, you're just exhausting yourself mentally without making any actual progress. Social media and modern technology have made this worse. 2. Because we now have constant access to information, opinions, and comparisons. You can overthink a decision and then immediately pull out your phone to research it more. Read reviews, see what other people think, compare yourself to others who seem to have it all figured out, and this just feeds the overthinking monster with more material to process. Plus, the always-on nature of our devices means there's no natural break. You can overthink at 3 a.m. during your lunch break, while you're supposed to be watching a movie. Your brain never gets a chance to truly rest and reset. The perfectionism factor also plays a huge role. Many overthinkers are also perfectionists, and perfectionism is rooted in the belief that there is a right way to do things and that if you just think hard enough, analyze thoroughly enough, you'll find it. But most of life's decisions don't have objectively right answers. There are just different options with different trade-offs, and perfectionism makes it almost impossible to accept this reality. So you keep thinking, keep analyzing, trying to find that perfect choice or perfect response that will eliminate all risk and guarantee the best outcome. But that doesn't exist. So you just keep thinking. And let's not forget the role of past experiences and trauma. If you've been criticized, rejected, or hurt in the past, your brain becomes hypervigilant, constantly scanning for signs that it might happen again. This is a protective mechanism, but it manifests as overthinking, analyzing every interaction for hidden meanings, replaying conversations to make sure you didn't say anything that could lead to rejection, worrying about future scenarios where you might be hurt or embarrassed. Your brain is essentially trying to protect you from pain, but in doing so, it creates a different kind of pain, the exhausting, relentless pain of overthinking. So why does it feel impossible to stop? Because it's not just one thing, it's a perfect storm of evolutionary programming, neural pathways, stress responses, psychological traits, modern pressures, and learned patterns all working together to keep your brain in that analytical loop. The good news is that understanding all of this is actually the first step toward breaking the cycle. Because when you realize that overthinking isn't a personal failing, but rather a predictable result of how your brain works, you can start approaching it with more compassion and using strategies that actually work with your brain's wiring rather than against it. Things like mindfulness, which helps you notice thoughts without getting caught up in them. Cognitive behavioral techniques that help you challenge and reframe unhelpful thought patterns. Setting specific worry times so your brain knows it will have a chance to process concerns rather than doing it constantly. Physical exercise, which helps discharge that stress energy. And simply recognizing that not every thought deserves your attention or analysis are all ways to work with your brain's tendencies rather than trying to force them to stop, which, as we've discussed, just doesn't work. If this video resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need to hear this, and let me know in the comments what your biggest overthinking triggers are. I love hearing from you all. And remember, your overthinking brain isn't broken. It's actually trying to protect you. It's just using outdated software for modern problems. And with the right understanding and tools, you can absolutely learn to quiet it down. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.